Hi, I'm Matthew Herzberg, and this is the Myopia Mindset. This is your weekly check-in for all things inspiration, motivation, and education on your path to success with myopia management. Speaking of education, we're going to be doing something a little bit different on the podcast. My guest for this episode is none other than series regular Matthew Martin. Matthew, welcome to the podcast.
I am super excited to be here this evening. We have a whale of a lecture for you. I'm pretty stoked about it.
Yeah. And so we're going to be learning a lot here. So as my old teacher used to say, get out your spiral notebooks and your number 2 pencils, get ready to take notes because you're going to learn something. Matthew Martin is one of the best speakers in the business, and I'm going to be turning it over to him in just a second. But before we get started, Matthew, if anybody has any questions about what they're going to be learning in this lecture, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me at Auburn Optical, that's AUBURN Optical at gmail.com. And I will absolutely get back to you and help you in any way that I can. We still have the best specialty in all of eye care, and I'm in it to win it. If you want help, I'll try to help you.
Right. And also, if you enjoy this episode, let us know. Leave us a 5-star review wherever you found this episode. Share it with a friend if you can. And if you love what we're doing at the Myopia Mindset, please consider becoming a paid supporter. You'll get tons of bonus content, extended editions of every episode that we do. And we got a lot of new stuff we're ironing out and could be rolling out in the future. So myopiamindset.com is where you can find out more information about that. All right, Matthew Martin, let's get started with the lecture.
Sounds fantastic. So we're going to be doing myopia management, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So this is going to be candidates for myopia management with an emphasis on OrthoK. If you know me, and I hope you do know me, you'll know that I am an OrthoK fiend. It is my favorite way to manage myopia. I get the most peripheral defocus using OrthoK, so it's near and dear to my heart, but we will touch on other things in this discussion as well. So let's jump right to it. First of all, the contents of this webinar and the opinions expressed are solely the responsibility of me, Matthew J. Martin. And so just FYI, this is all of my doing. So if you're unhappy, you can reach out to me and be unhappy with me personally. All right, let's jump right in. So I think the first question that I like to ask, and it's a really interesting question, is what role does ethnicity play when we're talking about myopia management? And I think this is something that's very well covered in the industry. And I think it's very pertinent to some of our concern for when we choose to work with a candidate and when we decide to get involved with a myopia management. How long do we wait? Some of that type of stuff. And everyone knows that the Asian population does tend to be more myopic, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. So what role does ethnicity play? So a child is progressing, and it's important for us to remember that, did we miss something here? Nope, we didn't miss anything. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. So basically what I'm telling you is that ethnicity does play a role, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But it's important, but it's also unimportant from the perspective that if a child is progressing, if they have measurable axial length progression, if their prescription is getting larger, then we need to do something regardless of whether that child is Caucasian or Asian. So keep in mind that ethnicity is important, and it is part of our decision making, but it's not the end-all be-all of when we're going to stop to help that child. So let's talk about the factors that are most important. What is the most important factor for how long a person's eyeball is going to be? Matthew Herzberg, what are your thoughts?
The most important factor.
What's the most important factor on how long an eyeball is going to be?
When we have age of onset, earlier is greater.
100% true. Think about that for a moment. That makes sense, right? The sooner you get started on that myopia progression, the longer your eyeball is going to be and the more problems that you're going to have. Age of myopia onset alone, in and of itself, predicted high myopia 80 5% of the time. That's a significant amount. What about sex? Female is in excess of men. So you're going to see that female children will progress more quickly typically than male children. What about ethnicity? We talked about this earlier. Asian children will progress farther and quicker than Caucasian children, okay? This is one I'm sure, Matthew, that's near and dear to your heart because I know for a fact it's near and dear to your dad's heart, so I suspect you saw a ton of it or have heard a ton of this. What about environment? What environments make myopia worse? Is it a pastoral environment where a child's working on a farm and spending a lot of time outdoors? Or is it an environment where someone is inside an office, inside a classroom, playing their instrument in a small room? I think this is an obvious thing to people now, but it's easy to forget that it wasn't. And a lot of times I will talk to my patients and we'll be discussing things that we can do to slow down myopia. And I go back to the studies, you'll love this. I'll go back to the studies from the early 1900s. So they did these studies in the early 1900s where they went out and they looked at Inuit Eskimos. And they found out that Inuit Eskimos, only about 2 or 3% of the population was nearsighted. Why? They spent their time looking over these vistas of ice. They were chasing whales. They were doing a lot of outdoor stuff. Maybe they did some scrimshaw. Maybe they did some reading, because I'm not saying that those people weren't able to read. I'm saying they didn't spend nearly the amount of time that children did, even in the 1950s inside, and how much time children spend today. I think this is obvious, but I'm not sure if this was always obvious, right? So
Right.
we know an Asian child, a female Asian child, getting started with her myopia earlier, and she's probably going to be in a high-tech environment, meaning, she plays an instrument. She's going to be doing some of a lot of these indoor activities with studying and doing well in school, all that type of stuff. Those things are going to push our children to be more nearsighted. Now, does that mean that we should encourage our kids not to read? No, that is not the case. But we do want to be very cognizant of getting kids outside as much as possible. And they've done studies that show this. I can't remember the name of the study, and I'm terrible about quoting specific names and dates. But I do know that they did a study where they could show during the summer rates of myopia go down dramatically. Okay? Rates of myopia progression, I should say, go down dramatically. Not the overall gestalt of how many people are nearsighted, but the speed at which those kids are becoming more nearsighted decreases during the summer. Why? Because they're outdoors, right? That's what we want. So let's do the first case, okay? The first case I call mini-me, all right? Now, mini-me, a child presents to your office with the following presentation. Okay, 6 years old. Yeah, not untypical in our office to get kids that young. We specialize in pediatrics. I'm sure a lot of the people listening to this podcast also specialize in pediatrics. We see kids this young all the time. It's just part and parcel of what we do. This child is accompanied by her grandma. Now, this is an interesting discussion. We get a lot of kids who come in with grandma. Maybe mom's busy. Maybe mom's working. Maybe mom didn't have time. So you need to be aware that when they come in with a grandparent, it can change sometimes the historical aspects of our case. So we saw this child, and the prescription with the exam and cyclopentolate is plus a half OU. So a small prescription, age 6 years old. That all makes pretty good sense, right? Could be this child, okay? Could be this child here, right? What questions do you as a practitioner have? Okay?
Yeah.
Matthew, what are you thinking? Do you have any questions?
Yeah, my questions are family history. My questions are axial length.
Yep.
Probably, what was their last exam? Have they had a last exam, or are you the first?
Yes, that's exactly right. So let's go through that. Family history. How nearsighted are mom and dad, right? In this particular case, grandma didn't know, and I had to do a little bit of research to find that out. So mom was minus 750, and dad was minus 575. So those are some pretty big prescriptions, okay? Question number 2. Has the child had a previous exam? The answer to that is yes, they had a previous exam. The exam last year, the prescription was plus 1.75. Now, that is a little muddied, the water's a little muddied, by the fact that that was a non-cyclopentylate refraction, meaning their visual system was not completely relaxed. But, even given a little bit of slop in the system, that's a pretty big difference between plus 1.75 and plus a half this year, okay? Now, did anyone collect previous axial length measurements? The answer to that was no, okay? So what tests do you want to run? Now, I'm just going to give you this one, Matt, because I don't expect you to necessarily know this, even though I know you're in the industry and you're very smart. But what tests do you want to run on this child? Number one most important thing for me, axial length. I honestly don't care what that prescription is. I don't care what glasses I have to use to make them see. I'm really interested in that axial length. Now, I know that stuff all factors in, and I don't mean to be rude, but I'm telling you, axial length has really become my go-to. I'm going to get a topography, right? This happens to be a keratoconic topography, so you don't want to see that in a child. But we want to get a topography to make sure their corneas look normal, if you will. Okay? And then we want to get a slit lamp exam. So we want to make sure everything's healthy, okay? And then obviously it's nice to get a dilated fundus examination. Do I get a dilated fundus examination every time? I try real hard. Does it always work in my favor? Nah, it really doesn't. But you should always try to get a dilated exam at that initial visit or very close to it, right? To make sure that everything's whole in the periphery and that we're not seeing any signs of any problems, okay? Now, thoughts. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lay out, do we, don't we, right? So we're going to have two different arguments here. One of the options is we do. Why? Why would we want to start working on a child who's a plus a half? That's a good question, right? Because they're not nearsighted yet, right? It's in the works. There's a country song that says, I can't see a single storm cloud in the sky, but I sure can smell the rain, right? So everyone's been there. Everyone's been out on a summer afternoon when you're like, man, it just smells like rain. And then, sure enough, it does happen. So do we or don't we? This is a good question. So if we do, and why would be to prevent that minus 750, what modality would we start with? Okay, that's a great question too, because we have so many options now. We have Ortho-K, my favorite. We have peripheral defocus contact lenses, which some people call myopia control contact lenses, right? And those are ones that have a peripheral curve that creates myopic defocus, pulling the light rays in front of the retina and prevents the eyeball from getting longer. And then we also have low-dose atropine. Low-dose atropine might not necessarily be a bad choice here either. So we have some choices, okay? We could also not. I think it's important within the bounds of myopia management and within the bounds of eye care to remember that we can choose not to choose. We have these conversations where we're always talking about going to do this, going to do that, going to do this. Sometimes we don't have to. So that's not an unreasonable thing in this particular case to choose not to choose, right? And then if we don't choose to do something now, we definitely need to have this child in the hopper, and we need to be following this child going forward. Now, I've talked about this with you on other podcasts, and I've talked about this from stage whenever I get the opportunity to get on stage. And that is that myopia management is not a snapshot game. It's not, let's do something now. It's, we're seeing your child, we're following your child. Maybe it's every 6 months. Maybe if it's a hot case, it's every 4 months. Maybe if we're not overly worried, it's a year. But we're always following these people so that we can help them when the time comes without waiting till things are too far gone, okay? So we need to be thinking about myopia management from the perspective of creating opportunities to help these people as time goes on, right? We want people to stay with our office, to develop, to figure out what we need to do to make things good for your child. And we don't necessarily want to push all that we need to do or achieve at today's visit, okay? So what are we going to measure? We're going to measure the prescription because, well, we should, right? But we're really going to measure that axial length measurement, okay? So now, when do we start, okay? So they did a really interesting study, the Collaborative Longitudinal Evaluation Ethnicity and Refractive Error Study, the CLEAR study. took 5,000 children ages 6 to 14 for more than 10 years. And what they found is that these are average prescriptions, right? So especially for kids who are gonna not end up necessarily becoming myopic. So ages 6 to 14, so 6 years old, it's not uncommon for a 6-year-old to be plus 0.75, age 7 or 8, not uncommon to be plus a half, age 9 and 10 to be plus a quarter, and age 11 to be basically no prescription at all, right? So that's sort of the norm. This child's not that far out of norm. So I think this is really important to talk about. That plus a half, that's not necessarily throwing up red flags here, right? I mean, that's not outside of what we would consider to be normal for this child, okay? But I am here to tell you that these children who have these lower powers at younger ages need to be watched more closely. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. I'm less concerned about a child at age 11 who has no prescription than I am about a child who's 5 years old and is not a plus power. That's kind of a complicated thing to conceptualize. But we expect kids who are 6, 7, 8 years old to be those plus powers. If their powers are already getting smaller and smaller and smaller, we know they're going to go the other side of that zero and become nearsighted. So what did I do? Okay, so this case was about 17 years ago, which is interesting because at that time, we were mainly doing OrthoK. We didn't do a lot of low-dose atropine, okay? I actually waited on this child, and I did not start doing OrthoK until the child became a -1. Okay? That was the thing back then. We rarely got involved if kids weren't already nearsighted and rapidly progressing in their nearsightedness. Okay? We were more reactionary, I think, and less preventative than we are now. Okay? So nowadays, I would have probably considered 0.25% low dose atropine for that plus a half child. Okay? Rather than wait until they're already nearsighted. Once they've hit that inflection point from plus a half to -1, their prescription typically takes off dramatically, right? So if I could have taken that child at a plus a half and maybe got them on low dose atropine, I probably could have prevented a significant amount of the nearsightedness and made it a lot easier for myself going forward because I would have had something in place already. But I at least wasn't actively doing low dose atropine 17 years ago, okay? And I'm not even sure, your dad, I assume, wasn't doing low dose atropine that many years ago, was he?
I mean, it was an option, but his go-to was Ortho-K. So there
Same for
wasn't
me.
a ton of atropine, but it was something that was in the toolbox.
Yeah. It was hard to source at the time. It was a whole thing.
Yep.
That child ended up being a -350, by the way, as an adult, which, frankly, I didn't think was too terribly bad. Okay. But she started out at that plus a half. Now, -350 isn't awful, and I'm not unhappy with that outcome, considering mom and dad were -750 and -6 accordingly. But it would have been nice if I could have kept her to a -1 or a -2 or maybe even plano, right? Again, I was fighting genetics, but these days I probably would have started a little sooner, and I would have made the argument to mom and dad based on axial length measurements that we should have been involved and worked on doing prevention versus being in a situation where we're just trying to keep them from being, -7, 8, or 9. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So let's jump on to the next case. And I think this case is super fun. I presented this at a couple meetings, and I've had a bunch of interesting conversations about this case because it's kind of a unique case. I've had 2 or 3 like this over the course of my career. And when I lecture on stage about this, I get really interesting feedback, and I run into a lot of doctors who've had this very similar experience. So we're going to hit the way back button, okay? This is the don't stop till you get enough case. And we're going to take the way back machine all the way to 2012, okay? So going way back, all right? I had an 11-year-old Caucasian female come to my office, okay? So she's female, which means she's going to progress quicker than men, right? She's Caucasian, which means she's probably going to progress a little less fast than an Asian patient, but she was still progressing. So the cyclopentolate refraction. So not only did I do a refraction, but I also completely knocked out her visual system after 40 minutes and did a cyclorefraction for her. And I found she was a -2. Okay. I want you to keep that -2 in mind. It's going to come up later. Her previous prescription, just a year and a couple months before that, was -0.5. So she went from a -0.5 to a -2 in about a year and 2 months, something along those lines. Okay. Pretty big prescription change, right?
Yep.
Now, again, this was 2012. We were doing axial length measurement at that time with applanation, believe it or not. So you would put anesthetic in their eye and we would like touch their eye with a probe. It was a whole thing. Okay. So I don't know if I've got good axial length measurements on this young lady. So our options in 2012, okay? So we're going back 13 years. Distance center multifocal contact lenses, they were available, but I wasn't doing a lot with it. They didn't have the MiSight lens. They didn't have the natural view lens at that time. And those are my two go-to lenses for peripheral defocus or myopia management contact lenses. Nothing raises the hair on the back of my neck worse than when someone starts spouting off about multifocal contact lenses instead of using the proper terminology, okay? Multifocal contact lenses are for old people. For young people, we're doing peripheral defocus contact lenses, myopia management contact lenses, bifocus contact lenses, whatever you need to do. But I think we need to make a real active, aggressive stance on not using the term multifocal contact lenses. I think it does the profession a disservice, and I think it does patients a disservice as well. But again, personal opinion, results may vary, okay? So distance center multifocal contact lenses, look, I threw up a little bit when I said that. We were doing very little of that, okay? Low dose atropine. We were doing a little bit of low dose atropine in 2012, but again, it's not been my favorite thing to do. I do a lot of it these days in comparison to what I once did, but it's not always my favorite choice for slowing down the progression of myopia. But again, a lot of doctors have great success with it, and I do as well. I just saw 2 patients this afternoon who are on low dose atropine, so it's not that we don't do it. So OrthoK has been our bread and butter since 2003, and probably seems obvious what I went with here. So she was fit into a GOV Dr. Tongue design at that time, okay? And Dr. Tongue still does the GOV lens. That's a pretty darn good lens. It's not, I don't use it as much maybe as I use some of my other lenses, and I'm agnostic, so I fit everything. I fit Wave, I fit Contax, I fit GOV, I fit Euclid, I fit Forge. If you name it, I'll fit it. And I think different Ortho-K lenses work better for different patients, work better for different size of eyeballs or HVIDs. And I think that they work better for myopia management as well, depending on how you tailor it. Okay. So I do everything. I am definitely agnostic. You'll run into people who are like, I only fit Wave. I fit a lot of Wave these days, but I also fit a ton of other stuff. So I like to be able to look at different things, put things on eye, sort of all that jazz. So just FYI. So don't stop till you get enough, okay? So I fit this young lady, great results. 20/20, beautiful topographies, nice center distance treatment zone, nice ring of peripheral defocus. I think I was getting like 5. I went over this file recently. I was getting 5 or 6 diopters of peripheral defocus. So I was pulling those peripheral light rays way in front of the retina, right? I was just like, boom. Kid was happy. And time passed. I saw her every 6 months for 6 months for a follow-up, and then 1 year for new retainers, because we replace retainers every year as part of our program, right? So this just went on. I love this little gift, by the way. This is from Phineas and Ferb, which is just such a classic. So time went on. Now, I'm going to take a side note here. And Matthew and I discussed this slide. This slide, as I originally had it written, had actual fees on it. And we were a little unsure of how discussing fees works in a non-credit discussion. So this is a podcast, so you're not going to get credit for this. You're just listening to it because you like to hear me. or maybe you're just crazy or one of the two. But the economics of this looks much more impressive when you can actually see the numbers, right? But
Yep.
we're going to use X here because everybody listening to this, I assume, has some basic math background. So we're going to call the initial fees X, and X is your fitting fee, okay? Your fitting fee is between you and the patient, and how you want to get paid for the amount of expertise and effort you're putting into your case. Now, I do want to take a moment and talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart, and that is this. Whatever you're charging for fees, your fees need to be high enough that you get excited to fit a patient in myopia management, whether it's peripheral defocus contact lenses, whether it's Ortho-K, whether it's low-dose atropine. If you are not charging enough to be excited about doing it, you're not going to continue to do it. Now, I have been quoted in the press as saying that I raise my fees whenever someone complains about my fees. And that's a little tongue in cheek, but it's also kind of true from the perspective that whatever you're charging right now, you should be excited. When a patient comes in, you should be like, yes, we're going to make money. They're going to be happy. They're going to get a great product. They're going to get great service. And at the end, they're going to be happy that they did this program. Okay. So I just want you to make sure that you're being paid adequately for your expertise and your enthusiasm and your skill set. Okay. Because I think when people don't get paid enough, that's when they quit doing it. They don't like it. It's no fun. I'm working. I'm not making any money. So make sure that you are getting what you need. Okay, so there's my 2 cents. So we're going to start out with fees X, okay? And that could be whatever do you decide to charge, but you need to charge enough, okay? So X is the initial fee for the fitting. And with that fitting, they're going to get a pair of retainers. In my office, they get a whole year's worth of solutions, plungers, all the things they need in order to be successful, which is a whole discussion because we could have a whole podcast on yearly programs because I'm a huge yearly program fiend. Okay. So then first year, everything went really well, right? We looked at the little map or the little GIF thing that showed what we were talking about with time passing. So the yearly fee for the first year, after they finish the first year, so they pay X amount of money, they do that first year. And then when the next year rolls around, we charge them 1/3 of your original fee. And that 1/3 of X covers new retainers, solutions, plungers, all the things they need for the year with a 6-month follow-up and a Progent cleaning, okay? The next year, we charge the same thing, 1/3 of that original fee, then 1/3 of that original fee, then 1/3 of that original fee. And what's unique about Ortho-K patients is a lot of times once you get that initial fit nailed down, once you get that in position, and you get that successful, oftentimes I'm just ordering duplicates. Like I'll have a day, yesterday, for example, I think I ordered 3 or 4 pairs of duplicate retainers. So patient came in, everything's beautiful, topographies are great, axial length measurements are slowed down, all that's really going well. We're just going to get you new retainers. And so they have to get new retainers every year because it's part of our program. That's very important. And then it's really easy. I'm just ordering them. Sometimes I'm sending in an email. Sometimes I'm just going on to someplace and ordering where I ordered it previously. But what I want to illustrate to you is that a lot of people complain that Ortho-K or myopia management is not profitable. And I'm here to tell you that if it's done right, it can be very profitable. And if it's done right, it can be very relaxing. It doesn't have to be miserable. It should always be fun for you. Okay. You should always be excited to do this stuff. So these are her fees, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. By the time we get through the end of her time wearing retainers or Ortho-K, they have paid 4 times that original fee, right? And so you in your mind's eye are like, I'm charging X amount, whatever that X amount is because we can't talk about it. 4 times that X amount is a significant amount of money. And then on top of that, you're also collecting your yearly exam fee from the insurance company. But we're never, at least in my office, we're never taking insurance money for the Ortho-K component, okay? And the reason we don't do that is because as soon as we start doing that, we get paid less and then we stop having fun and then no one wants to do it anymore. So total fees is going to end up being 4 times your original fee plus your exam fees. Okay? For something that is very easy once the system is up and rolling. Okay? Now, no insurance. Take home message. So we did this for many years. Okay? We started in 2012, is that what we said? In 2021, the patient decided she was going to stop wearing retainers at the age of 20. Okay? Is that reasonable? Yeah. You don't have to do it forever if you don't want to. Now, having said that, I have a lot of patients who started when they were 8, 9, 10 years old who are still wearing retainers 15, 16, 17 years later. Okay? So you don't have to stop. I have some patients who do retainers for a long time, then they get into their mid-20s. They're like, I think I want to stop. They stop. They do glasses and contact lenses. Then they go back to wearing Ortho-K again. Okay? So keep in mind, you don't have to do it forever, but a lot of patients choose to because they like it. Okay? So in 2021, this patient decided she was going to stop wearing retainers at the age of 20. We washed her out over a 6-week period. Okay? An interesting thing happened. Let's talk first about washing out a patient. Okay? Before we go any farther with the don't stop till you get enough case, I would just want a big shout out to Dolly Parton, who was inducted into the Hall of Fame, an amazing woman. I am just fascinated by her. She's done so much positive stuff, but this is one of her famous Dolly Parton songs, The Wash Day Blues. Okay? So, how long does it take to wash out a patient? Great question. Typically, the RX goes back to normal in about a week. Okay? So typically when we take a patient out of retainers, they go back to normal in about a week, but it takes a little longer than that for everything to settle down. Okay? However, the corneal changes may last upwards of 90 days. So when I take a patient out of retainers, I typically tell them you'll go right back to your old prescription in about a week. Okay? But then it could take maybe as much as 90 days to fully come back to normal. So when do I know if I've got to the end? A good rule of thumb is 2 duplicate topographies 1 week apart probably mean that that patient is fully washed out. Okay? Now, when we washed this patient out, we discovered that the prescription had changed. It went down. Down.
How
How low
much?
do you ask? How much would you guess it went down?
I don't know because I'm baffled by this.
Because
So
it should only go up, right?
yeah.
Right? It should only go up. We should be fighting to keep her from being, because she started out, what do we say? She started out as a -2, right? So we should have been trying to keep her from being a -6 or 7, right?
Yep.
Okay. So her most recent cyclorefraction after 3 years, actually after 4 years now, okay? 4 years after we stopped. Her prescription is +1/4, -1/2, 180, and plano -1/4, 180. So she doesn't wear glasses at all now.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because how does an eyeball not only not grow dramatically longer, which is what we're trying to prevent, but how does an eyeball grow shorter? It raises 2, I think, really good questions. Number 1, why did her RX decrease? Was the original prescription wrong? I don't know. In lectures that I've given in front of large groups of people, I've had people tell me that I must have just got the prescription wrong. But it's wild to think that a cyclopentolate refraction that agreed with the dry refraction also was a -2. Like, that's really hard. I mean, you could see by missing it by a little bit, 1/4 of a diopter, a 1/2 a diopter, but -2, I mean, anyone who's ever done a cyclopentolate refraction, when you put cyclo in a patient's eyes, they're giving you the straight answer. It's like a truth serum. They can't really tell you otherwise because it only works when it works. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So with regards to cyclopentolate, I have a hard time imagining that wasn't the case. Although it is not found in literature, this is not my only case where the patient ended up with a smaller prescription than when they started. I know that your dad has also run into that, correct?
I don't know. I'm going to
I'm pretty
ask him
sure. I'm pretty sure I've had
now.
this
Yeah.
conversation with him. But I've had 2 or 3 patients who started out with a prescription and finished with no prescription at all, which I find fascinating.
Yeah.
I've never found anyone who could definitively tell me why that is. So there is an argument that the aggressive reverse curve and plus power / myopic defocus developed in this particular Ortho-K retainer somehow positively affected eye growth, but certainly we don't ungrow an eye, right? So not even Leonard Nimoy would know the answer to this one. Leonard Nimoy, as my son would say, would call this illogical.
Yep.
In the 70s, we had these ridiculous shows. There was a show called In Search of with Leonard Nimoy. It was the most deranged, wild Leonard Nimoy show ever. It was great. Anyways, um, so this brings up the question, when do we stop doing Ortho-K? Typically, we think of myopia progressing into the low 20s, although roughly speaking, 20% of the population who's nearsighted will increase by a diopter until their mid 20s. So for most of my patients, when parents ask, I tell them we're going to do this until your child is in their low 20s and then we'll stop. Okay? Does that mean that they can still progress? Yeah, it means they can still progress. But typically, that's pretty much where it's run its course. Okay? So do I think she'll regress? I thought she'd have regressed by now, but 4 years later, and she's not, 2021 to 2025, and she's still rocking. So
Hmm.
there you go. All right, what's next for that particular patient? We're just going to watch her. She comes in every year. She's like, this is the best thing that's ever happened. I still couldn't, I couldn't be any happier. She's an interesting patient. She wanted to be a marine biologist, which is super cool, but she couldn't find any work. So I'm not too sure what she's up to now. Last time, I think she was deciding whether she wanted to go into medicine. So, all right. Are you ready for the next one?
Yeah.
All right. So let's jump on to the next one because I think this is a really fun one too. Okay. So case number 3 is going to be it's raining cats and dogs. Okay. So 12-year-old Caucasian male. Oh, Caucasian male. Awesome. Manifest in cyclorefraction is a minus 250, and left eye is minus 2.25. Okay. Mom's a minus 5, dad's a minus 350. Okay. So not huge prescriptions, but I live out in the Midwest, and Midwestern people are crazy about sports, right? Like we're crazy, dude. We're crazy about football. We're crazy about hockey. We're really all up in our sports. And so they really wanted to do something for this child, not necessarily because his prescription was that large, although minus 250 at 12 years old, that's not huge, but it's there. But they really wanted to free him up from glasses and contact lenses for football, right? Now, here's the key. Take a peek at that axial length measurement. That axial length measurement is 25.20 millimeters. Now, Matthew, I don't expect you to be super knowledgeable about what that means, but what I'm telling you is that that's a little longer than we really expect a minus 250 eyeball to be, okay? So that is going to throw up a flag, right? Because that's going to be a problem for us. That axial length measurement makes me go, huh, is the child either have a longer eyeball than their prescription, or are they going to pretty soon catch up with that longer eyeball? Okay. So what are we going to do here? We've got some options. Let's talk about our options. Okay. Number one, I should say, what are we going to choose? We can choose to low dose atropine. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm excited about low dose atropine for this kid. Why am I not excited about low dose atropine for this kid? Because he plays football, right? I don't want him out bouncing around in the sun, trying feeling like he's standing on the surface of the sun. It's going to be ridiculous. So it comes down to me for peripheral defocus contact lenses like the MiSight or the VTI Natural View or Ortho-K. All right. Would you like to guess what I chose?
I'm going to say Ortho-K.
Yeah, no, I chose violence. No, I'm kidding. I didn't choose violence. I definitely chose Ortho-K. Just as a side note, what an absolute shame That show was fantastic.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch it?
Yeah, Game of Thrones for
Oh my
sure.
gosh, that last season was so awful. It just left such a bad taste in everyone's mouth. Anyways, I digress. Matthew Herzberg, Matthew Herzberg actually sent me an email saying, let's try to keep Matthew Martin on topic this time. That actually happened, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm talking about Game of Thrones. So moving on.
I love it.
So let's jump in and talk about this young man's topography. So here's his topographies. Pretty straightforward, boring topography. First thing that you're going to notice, this is axial topography. Why is that important? Axial topography is a really good topography for evaluating power of the cornea, and especially when we're looking at post-wear maps. So his Ks are 44.01 and 44.27. His eccentricities are pretty much middle of the road, maybe a little bit more spherical than flat, but nothing too dramatically exciting here. And then look, this is his post-wear map. And if you look at this post-wear map, you're going to see the original map on the top left, okay? And then below that, you're going to see the post-wear map. So top left map is the original. Post-wear map is what we did. And if you look at the map on the right-hand side, you're going to see what is called a subtraction map. So a subtraction map takes the original, and then it takes what we did, and then it shows us what our effect was on the eye, okay? So in this particular case, we're getting about 0.2 or 2.36 diopters. We said he was a minus 250. And if you look where the cursor is at there, you'll note the cursor is a little low. If we move the cursor up to this dark blue area, we're probably at minus 250, okay? So we're rocking this kid, right? This is beautiful. This is what we want, okay? And if you were to highlight the difference between the central blue portion right here, okay, and the edge over here, you would see that there is a strong peripheral defocus aspect here, meaning this is minus 2.36. And if you come down here, I hope you can see my cursor moving. If you come down here, this is probably plus 2.0. So between the two of them, that's 4 diopters of peripheral defocus. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I hope it does. So this is how it turned out, which I'm sure everybody who's watching this is like, boring, successful case, don't really want to see it, snooze fast. But check this out. This was his latest visit. So I'm looking at things. His vision's not as crisp as it was. At the last visit, he was a perfect 20/20. This is a month ago. And today he comes in and his vision's only about 20/30. That's kind of underwhelming. His chief complaint is reduced quality of vision. Yeah, and he also tells me his vision wears off early, meaning he starts okay in the morning, but by 2 or 3 in the afternoon, things just aren't as sharp as they were first thing in the morning. Also, he complains a little bit about discomfiture when he puts his retainers in. Okay? So, vision a little bit underwhelming. Topography, as you can see here, is a little bit underwhelming. Quality of vision is a little less clear than it was, and his vision wears off early. So here's his presentation. Got some redness going on. It's got some mild redness there. It's got some mild chemosis. Chemosis, Matthew, is that sort of puffy appearance to the white part of his eye. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
The example I like to use of chemosis, if you take a bowl, put some water in it and throw tissues in that water, okay? So imagine a bowl full of water with some loose tissues in there. You would have this like sloppy, loose kind of conglomeration. And that's kind of what the conjunctiva looks like when it's got chemosis. No pain, not painful. No photophobia, so he's not light sensitive. And his cornea is clear, so the cornea is clear, okay? Now, I know, Matthew, that you spend a lot of time around doctors. You spend a lot of time talking myopia management. You spend a lot of time working in this field. What are you thinking?
I mean, just initially, either there's something wrong with the INR or there's gunky lenses, like they're not being cleaned properly.
Those are all good thoughts. So what are we thinking? Number one, why the decrease in visual acuity? Good question. Why is the vision not holding? Another good question. Why does the topography look muted? So I'm gonna jump back for just a second here. A lot of jump backs, but see how crisp that is there?
Yeah.
See how muted that looks there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Jumping forward again. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so why does the topography look muted? Could be a solution reaction. You said maybe when they're putting them in, it's causing a problem, right? Could be old retainers. We replace our retainers every year and we are super aggressive. Nothing unwinds me more than I talk to some doctors like, man, let them replace them every 2-3 years. No, 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 they get replaced every single year. Hormones, maybe. If this was a perimenopause woman, yeah, I could see that. I have a lot of women I fit who are doing good, and then we get hormonal changes, and things can become difficult with dry eye, with all the cell mediators associated with that. So here's that presentation again, okay? Now, what if I told you his eyes were itchy? What does that make you think, Matt? What are you thinking now?
Do you have an allergy to anything that
That's
we're using?
exactly right. We're
Ah,
looking at allergic conjunctivitis, and I see so much of this during the summer. I bet out of every OrthoK evaluation I have had this summer, and we are so ridiculously busy. I'm doing, I don't know, returning patients. I'm probably seeing probably 3 on average, some days 5, some days 2 OrthoK patients or more a day, right? Like it's constant. Maybe it's 4 or 5 patients in a day. Maybe it's one day and 5 the next, right? We see a lot of them. And I would say probably fully a third of them have summer allergies that are affecting them. This year in Michigan, where I'm located, we've got a real smoke problem from Canada. So they got these crazy wildfires in Canada, and we're getting this smoke that's coming down our way, and it's holding the pollen count in. So the smoke is acting like a vapor barrier, if you will. And allergies are just gonzo. It was bad during cottonwood season. It was particularly bad right now because we have corn pollen and we have wheat pollen, and then we also have soybean pollen. I live in the country, so these are things that happen here, okay? Allergic conjunctivitis. So this is a very straightforward treatment plan. First thing that we want to do is control that allergy. I really like olapatadine. So patadine, which comes under the trade name Pataday, P-A-T-A-D-A-Y, and you can tell I prescribe a lot of it because I even have a little rhyme when I say it. This stuff is amazing. Typically, I will use either the 0.1% or the 0.2%. If they use the 0.1%, they're using that 1 drop in the morning and 1 drop in the evening. If they're using the 0.2, it's 1 drop in the morning, okay? This stuff works wonderfully for making things better on insertion and for reducing a lot of the problems associated with those allergies. The other thing that we absolutely do is we Progent the retainers, okay? Progent is a oxidation reduction reaction that basically disrupts or peels off the proteins that are blocking up the curvatures on the back of that retainer. So people who maybe aren't familiar with OrthoK, the concept is when you wear a retainer, it's the curvatures on the back of that retainer and the fluid forces underneath that lens or that OrthoK lens that's causing the cornea to change shape so we get the result we want. My working theory is this. Allergic conjunctivitis causes proteins to spill into the tears that wouldn't otherwise normally be there. Leukotrienes, proteins, all the cell mediators that cause inflammation and redness and problems also show up to some lesser extent in tear film, okay? Those proteins are sticky and they stick to the curvatures on the back of that retainer. And when they stick to the curvatures on the back of the retainer, we lose its ability to do its job, which is why vision goes down, vision fades, and the topographies look muted because it's basically like muddying up the back of that Ortho-K lens so it doesn't do the proper molding. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Progent makes a world of difference. I just had a young man, literally this afternoon. He was in about a month ago. Mom's like, he's not seeing well, vision's not going well for him. I looked at him, he was about 2025, topographies were meh. We did Progent, started him on the Pataday. He came in today, he's like, I'm so happy, I couldn't be happier. Perfect 2020s. He's winning the bass fishing contest in his family. Super cool dude, and just doing great now because we cleaned them. And then I said to him, we're going to be smart with you because he's got a ton of allergies. I said, I'm going to see you every 90 days and we're going to Progent his retainers. And it's interesting because dad has allergies to a lesser extent, and dad's like, I want to get mine done at the same time. So we just made appointments for both of them.
Nice.
We charge X amount of money for them, not the same X as in the X I used earlier, but a much smaller version of X. So we want to cover the time it takes for us to do the Progent cleaning. But this is huge, huge, and a big factor why people are unsuccessful. Okay? So some people use this every 90 days. Great stuff. Now, what about an adult Ortho-K case? Okay? I know, Dr. Martin, you do a bunch of adult Ortho-K stuff because you like to do Ortho-K. So do you have any interesting cases? This is an interesting case. Okay? So now for something completely different, ladies and gentlemen. This I call the wet cement case, okay? This is a cool one. So 50-year-old Caucasian comes in. He is a foreman at a construction company. If I'm not mistaken, he actually owns the construction company, okay? But he's one of those guys who did the job and now he can't stop doing the job. So he's on the job site all the time, checking on his guys, doing that whole thing. So 50-year-old Caucasian, his manifest refraction is minus 450, minus 150, 180, minus 5 1/4, minus 1 1/4, 180. Interested in Ortho-K. Topographies, unfortunately, I've lost to antiquity. And I didn't want to fake some topographies, so we just don't have them in this particular case, okay? So his starting topographies I no longer have. So topographies were normal, just boring topographies. I want to say it was 43.5, 44, or something along those lines. Kind of a standard case. Not higher than 46, not flatter than 39. So just kind of that sweet spot that you want for a good Ortho-K patient. Slit lamp looked fine. Dilation was fine. Corneal diameter was 12.2. Patient states that he occasionally gets dry eye, but I mean, dude's 50. What do you expect, right? Life is like that. So he comes in and I fit him with an Ortho-K lens and the fit looked amazing. Like it was good. It looked good. Nice landing zone, nice edge lift, reverse curve looked good, treatment zone looked good. I mean, I was pretty excited, man. However, looking at this, Matt, look at that retainer on that eye, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You think it's large enough?
Is it large enough?
Yeah, I would say it's not.
Yeah,
you see the gap on the right-hand side?
Right, yeah. That's what I was going to say.
I think this is a little undersized. And I tend to fit my retainers fairly large. I'm a 95, 96% HVID guy or diagonal corneal diameter, because you can actually get corneas that are wider than they are tall or taller than they are wide. So that's an interesting discussion too. People talk about HVID, the horizontal visual diameter, but I measure mine at a 45-degree angle because I think that gives me a truer reading. But anyways, I think this is a little small. So I probably fit him a little small on top of everything else, okay? So I send him home, right? Because it looks gorgeous. I'm like, I'm a rock star. It's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. I'm not going to get all of your prescription, but I'm going to get most of it. And we're going to have a great experience. So he goes home. My staff teaches him how to take retainers in, put them out. We get through that whole process, right? Staff did the prep, did everything they were supposed to do. They send him home with his retainers. Comes in the next morning, okay? Staff did the prep work and got visual acuities, and visual acuities were poor. And when I mean poor, I mean you'd expect at a minus 5.5 that we're not going to get all the prescription at once, right? So here's a number line. Here's 0. -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -5.5. I'm not going to get all 5 diopters of that on the first day. I'm going to get 60% of it, right? So this guy's going to be about a -2, 2.5, and the distance is going to be fuzzy. His near is going to be good. We're going to get through it, right? Because, it takes a little bit of time, especially with old people. And I'm an old person too, so I get that. So I expect him to be kind of lousy at distance, but pretty good at near. But he comes in and his visual acuities were awful everywhere. Distance was terrible. Near was terrible. It was terrible. His topographies were unique, okay, to say the least, and very exaggerated. And the refraction indicated a large amount of astigmatism. So anyone who's listening, and I'm going to open this to you, Matt, what do you think I did wrong?
I mean, the size of the lens for the HVID is where I would go first.
Yeah, but his visual acuity was lousy at near. So that does make you wonder what happened, right? Like, here's what I did. So, do you see that green stuff right there? That's a humongous abrasion.
Oh.
Yeah. So what I did, and I think this is really fun, it's always, we go to these lectures, we listen to these doctors, myself included, and many doctors would like you to think they never make a mistake, right? They never screw up. They never get it wrong. Every case I do is gold. Chef's kiss, it's going to be perfect. That's not how it works. I don't care how good you are. Sometimes you're going to screw up. And this is a perfect example of everyone who's listening or anyone who's watching to understand that you can learn from my mistake. So what did I do wrong? I missed a case of MAP dot fingerprint dystrophy. So this patient had corneal dystrophy. And so he had an epithelium, and I'll explain this, an epithelial basement membrane dystrophy. So the front surface of the cornea is covered in these little cells called epithelial cells, okay? And those epithelial cells are locked to Bowman's membrane, which is the underlying tissue, by these things called zonules. And the zonules are kind of what attach that to the cornea. In the case of MAP dot fingerprint dystrophy, those epithelial cells are mushy, okay? And so what happened was I put this retainer basically onto wet cement. So instead of landing on his cornea and changing it subtly, it was basically like dropping a hubcap onto wet cement. It squished everything, okay? So I tell people it's very important to make sure that you're paying close attention to some of the subtle things that can get in your way. His complaint of occasional dry eye was actually related to what's called a recurrent corneal erosion. A recurrent corneal erosion is where the eyelid comes down and actually sticks to the front of the cornea. So when you wake up, you open your eye and it plucks up that epithelium. It causes you to have an abrasion on the front surface of your cornea. And I completely missed it, okay? The reason I included a money bag here is I think it's important to remember, okay, not to let money get in the way of watching what you're doing and making sure you're really being exact. I was excited because he was enthusiastic and he really wanted to do it. And he had money in hand and he was ready to go. And I was like, yeah, let's go. And because of that, I didn't take the time to make sure I was really dotting all my I's and crossing all my T's. So today's take-home lesson here is don't let your enthusiasm override your clinical evaluation, okay? So you need to be looking for some of that subtler stuff to make sure you're going to get the best possible outcome, okay? Now, you typically wouldn't see this in a child, but this is definitely something that I have run across before or after and avoided it. This patient's got a problem, let's not do it, okay? All right, so hopefully you have questions. Hopefully someone has listened to this and has had questions, and I'm going to let David S. Pumpkins end my lecture here. And you can reach out to me at auburnoptical@gmail.com, and I'm more than happy to get back to you, help in any way, discuss cases, any of that kind of stuff. And while I'm being super pushy, if you've listened to this lecture and you're like, wow, free content, this is, well, not free content, but this is pretty great stuff, I would love if you tossed me a Google review. So the easy way to do that is you just go to Auburn Optical in Auburn, Michigan, and you could toss a little Google review on there, because the more Google reviews you have in your hopper, the less concern you have for crazy people.
Yeah.
Matt, questions that you might have for me, dude?
I've got so many questions for you.
Is it about
And-
David S. Pumpkins? Because this slide is killing me, dude.
I've got so many questions. We're going to save my questions for the extended edition version of this podcast. So if you're a paid supporter, you go to myopiamindset.com, become a paid supporter. You'll get the extended version of this episode, which will include my questions, Matthew's answers, and that will conclude the essential edition. And just like Matthew said, if you enjoyed this episode, throw us a 5-star review, share this episode with a friend. Let us know what you think, myopiamindset@gmail.com. And hey, if you're interested in more, we'd love to know about it, because I see a series happening here. Kind of like have you ever heard of that podcast called The Dollop, where you have two comedians, one who's really interested in history and the other one who's kind of an idiot is the joke, but he's not an idiot, but he kind of just plays the idiot. So one comedian tells him a story from history and the other one reacts to it. Well, let's pretend I'm the idiot. And if we love this series, we're going to have Matthew Martin come back, explain a case to me, give me a presentation. I'm going to have loads of questions. I'll ask the stupid questions, and we'll see.
You don't
if we
have to,
something.
right?
Yeah.
Right. That's the take-home message. Is sometimes people don't want to ask questions, but if you're willing to ask them,
I'm willing to ask the stupid questions. I'm willing to be wrong. I'm not an optometrist. I'm always excited to learn more about myopia management, and I have no pride. So if you enjoyed this episode, let us know. myopiamindset@gmail.com. And for everyone else, we'll see you at the next one.